Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're gathered here today, not just as planners and leaders and community members, but also as humans who have witnessed firsthand the devastating toll wildfires can take. While the flames have extinguished, and actually not really here in San Diego County, there's pretty much a fire going on at all times. The effects aren't ending when the smoke clears. So for many individuals and communities, the emotional aftermath lingers long after the physical rebuilding begins. And you're going to hear today from Claire and Tennis and explore some often overlooked dimensions of post-wildfire recovery, specifically the mental health challenges that emerge and how we as planners and community advocates can be part of the healing. So with that, I'm going to hand it over for the presentation and hope everyone has a very safe weekend, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Hi, everybody. I'm Miguel Angel Vasquez, the immediate past president for the California Planning Roundtable, and I will be serving as the facilitator for today's webinar. I want to also let you know that we're deeply grateful to Claire and Tennis for agreeing to be with us today. They're very busy people, and what we have to hear from them today, as Carrie mentioned, is one of the aspects or the dimensions related to wildfire that sometimes we don't address. Our committee zoomed into that particular topic early on, but it was not easy to secure speakers for this particular talk. And I believe Tom Jacobson, who is also a member of the roundtable, he recommended our speakers for the day. So I'm going to go ahead and read their bios. They have an amazing background. And then I'm going to turn it over to Claire. So I'll begin by introducing Claire. Claire Hartman serves as the City of Novato's Community Development Director, overseeing the planning, building, code enforcement, and housing divisions. She joined the city in December 2023. Claire's professional expertise spans land use planning, environmental review, public engagement, and permit streamlining, as well as policy leadership in housing, economic development, cannabis regulation, and wildlife recovery. Prior to joining Novato, she dedicated 24 years to the city of Santa Rosa, where she rose through the ranks from city planner to director of planning and economic development, and also interim assistant city manager. As a key leader during times of crisis, Claire served as planning section chief in Santa Rosa's Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, starting with the 2017 Tubbs Fire, supporting the city through 5 major wildfire events in just 5 years. Her leadership was instrumental in the adoption of the award-winning Resilient City Ordinances, which enabled the rebuilding of more than 3,000 homes lost in the Tubbs Fire. Claire is a certified planner with the American Institute of Certified Planners and holds a bachelor's degree in environmental studies and planning from Sonoma State University and a master's degree in community and regional planning from the University of Oregon. She is also a returned U.S. Peace Corps volunteer, having served in the Czech Republic. Claire and her husband, Ron, have raised 3 children, and outside of work, she enjoys time with family and friends, making pottery, traveling, and being outdoors in nature. Our second speaker is Dennis Wick. He has served as director of Permit Sonoma County's Permit and Resource Management Department since November of 2013. Under his leadership, the agency integrates environmental protection with sustainable development through its planning, engineering, building, fire prevention, natural resources, code enforcement, and administrative divisions. Dennis brings a deep and diverse background in planning and development. Prior to joining Sonoma County, he was a principal at Berg Holdings, where he managed government affairs, site acquisition, design, and entitlement. His public service career began in Marin County, where he led current planning as development chief, as a certified member of AICP and the American Planning Association. He also holds a Juris Doctor from Golden Gate University School of Law in a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science with a public service emphasis from UC Santa Barbara. And he is also a long-time resident of Petaluma. He has been deeply engaged in civic life, serving twice as city planning commissioner and as a board president for several community organizations, including the Friends of the Petaluma River, the Petaluma People Services Center, and the Petaluma Area Chamber of Commerce. He's the president emeritus of the California County Planning Directors Association, and actively supports post-disaster recovery through the nonprofit After the Fire, providing mutual aid to counties across California and beyond. Dennis is also a part owner of Hen House Brewing Company. He and his partner Holly enjoy an active life with their 4 adult daughters and share love of endurance sports, cooking, and gardening. And with that, I'm turning it over to Claire. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you for the introductions. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. Okay, so let's get started. So actually, Tennis and I are going to co-present. We want to save most of the hour for our discussion and take your questions and handle our presentation that way. But we do have some slides to set the context in terms of from where we come from. We've worked a number of years together, side by side. Tennis with the County of Sonoma and myself with the City of Santa Rosa. So we're in the North Bay. We're the Santa Rosa is the 5th largest city of the North Bay. And we have a population in Santa Rosa of 175,000. And Tennis, what's the population of the County of Sonoma? Pop quiz.
About 500,000.
Okay. So we've experienced some wildfires. Probably, I know there's a similar map now, unfortunately, in different areas of California. So this used to look unique. It's no longer unique. But to put this in perspective, this represents 18 wildfires within our area where we were impacted either by smoke, evacuations, or direct impacts from fire. Another aspect of this is that when the Tubbs fire, which we'll talk a little bit about in a minute, hit us in 2017, you know, it was the most destructive fire at the time, and it came on suddenly. Since, unfortunately, and only a year later, the Camp Fire, or also, you know, people call it the Paradise. The Camp Fire is at the top. And then now, unfortunately, our LA fires are 2nd and 3rd most destructive. So Tubbs is now the 4th most destructive fire in the state of California. We're gonna, I'm gonna set the stage for what we experienced with the Tubbs fire because that sort of kicked it off for us. And it was one where myself, having started with the City of Santa Rosa in 1999, with the idea that I'm a disaster service worker and you routinely or, you know, regularly, irregularly get training about what that means and that, okay, in my role, I'm going to be a planning section chief. And you're like, okay, where's my checklist? It's so theoretical. And maybe you do a tabletop exercises with your colleagues, or even we did some with the County of Sonoma. But it wasn't until the night of October 8th, 2017, when it really became reality, and boy, did it. So I don't know, Tennis, if you want to jump in here in terms of how you entered the EOC world. And was this your first major response?
Actually, it was for me, it was a Napa earthquake that began. But I do remember the night of the 17th and getting rousted And before I could even leave my neighborhood, there were already thousands of cars streaming out through our community out to Highway 101, and people fighting in the gas station, fist fighting. And I thought, well, this is what disaster looks like. And of course, that was nonstop for weeks during the firefight. And as Claire said, we're talking about wildfire today, but we've also served in the Emergency Operations Center for multiple floods, multiple fires, the COVID outbreak, where many of us got tagged for work there, even homeless encampment enforcement. We've been used in a number of different ways because of our experience in responding to wildfire.
So this is just a map of how fast it went through, and at the time, this was a surprise to much of the staffing of our EOC, but has since become the norm when it gets to the edge of our urban areas. So Tubbs Fire started at 9:45 at night up in Calistoga, which is in the hills above Santa Rosa. I arrived at the EOC at 11:45, and it was before it hit our city limits, which wasn't much longer. It only took 2 hours to get down to the city limits, and then we were evacuating Fountain Grove. And it just kept going. One of the moments I will never forget is when it jumped the 6-lane highway of 101, which is right here. And by then it already cruised through Fountain Grove, jumped the 6-lane highway, and now it's outside of the fire severity zone. And just the looks on everybody's faces and the feeling of just, it was an impossible experience to describe. These are what now, unfortunately, we're seeing in the LA areas and routinely.
All too familiar.
And there's just no words to describe this. So as response volunteers, we activate the EOC. You arrive, even if it's in the middle of the night, which happened to be our first big experience, at least my first big experience. And you get to work and you go find that checklist and you figure things out. And it doesn't stop until you start to get a rhythm. And so your adrenaline's up for, such a long time. And in our case, at that time in EOC times, you were plugging computers in while you're trying to get phone calls. Now, a lot of us have warm EOCs or hot EOCs. And so that gives you so much more comfort. Technology is so much better, but here in the raw state, it was a little bit unnerving. But we were all ready to do it. The other thing I would note is while we were in the EOC room, and I'm sure, Tennis, you experienced this as well, you had first responders, you had the police and the fire and people who are used to this. And this is a big day for them, but they're trained. And they were showing up, and while they're working, they're losing their homes. They're finding out that their family or friends are losing homes. They've also lost everything while they're working. And that was really sobering to be working alongside people who are not indirectly impacted like I was, but directly impacted and still serving in this adrenaline running situation.
We did too. We had members of our team on my team. So we were in 12-hour shifts. And it's something to be working with somebody who's just lost their house, who's come back, and they just want to work through their grief, put their children in another part of their family's evacuation zone. So we can quantify the effects on our community, but I think beyond those numbers to the qualitative impacts on us, I hope we can get to some questions around how to better prepare, especially if you're from a community that hasn't gone through this yet. there are some things you can be doing now to make it far better.
So, one of the first things that we did is, of course, your damage assessment. And that's where now it's not just the aerials and the helicopter views. You're actually in the soot of this. And again, very impactful to, I would say, I like to call it a civilian first responders, where, you know, you were you were planning, maybe you were a processing planner and you're the assistant to a building inspector, and you guys are going out and doing the damage assessment while you can still smell, while the fire is still going. So it's just that the expectation that you just go do it is in you, and you do it, but you don't feel the consequences until much later, and sometimes years later. But when you see these other fires across California, you see these similar photographs, like it puts me right back into the car.
Yeah.
So this is one of my personal slides. I threw a couple of these in here. Because we're human, and there was one point where, like I said, I started at 11:45 before the fires hit the city limits, and I didn't leave for, I did 2 weeks of 12-hour shifts, and they were all at night. I'm not even a night person. I had no idea what was day or night, and I was just running on adrenaline. And one of my colleagues ended up working a 24-hour shift just so I could have a day off. And it was so intense. And so one of the things that I asked them to provide the night shift is just, how do we convert our lives so we can be productive and keep this up? Because we knew it was going to be a sustained thing. And so they produced some tips for us.
Yeah, that was just probably the most acute when it comes to mental health. One of the most acute things for us was once during the 2017 fire, and you saw how the fire literally came down into the city and past the county center. During the 2017 fire in the Kincaid, where the incident commander called us and said that the support strike team he had keeping the fire off of our campus had to be withdrawn. So to reduce our crew to a core team of just 5 of us. And then the second instruction was go outside and call your family and say goodbye. That probably more than anything in my life has challenged my mental health.
Yeah, and I'll say, because we had 5 fires in 5 years that we were responding to, like the idea of it being normal that my family goes to the right and I go to the left.
Yeah.
To have that happen over and over again is really, and you don't know where your family's going to the right, but you're going to the left and you're going to help with this response.
Yeah.
So just a few slides to get through this so we can get to questions. This is the city of Santa Rosa statistics. However, county was in the same boat. At this time, it couldn't have been the worst time in terms of housing production. We were already far behind. And we were gearing up, both of us, with lots of streamlining policies, but nothing to the scale that we needed to address this, which was in Santa Rosa's 3,000 units that we lost overnight. And then on top of that, trying to build 1,000 units every year was our goal. So these are some of I won't go into these, but obviously standing up a standalone permit center, record center. And the one thing I'll say is, and this is while we were in the EOC working at night, drafting the resilient city policies, literally brainstorming, how can we take every obstacle away so that people can rebuild, and add housing, like temporary housing to allow for staging of the families or staging of the construction teams. And then it's one house at a time. So, I think I cried this day where we got our first house in, and we knew we had a lot more to go. But you celebrate every little win as you get there. And so one house at a time. And I think it's really important to note, yeah, it's going to be a sustained tenure for your rebuilding and response. And you really do just try to celebrate milestones as much as possible. Now I'm going to talk about the physical recovery, and then we'll have to talk about the mental recovery, which is much more subtle and long-term and isn't as talked about. It's not as tangible. And so it's easy to look at our numbers, and we did great. So all the resources that would have gone into brand new housing went into brand new housing, but it was the rebuilt, the replacement housing. So it sort of doubled up on all our resources, and we again we're struggling with that. But Santa Rosa stats, within 18 months we had done 1,200 homes. Within 5 years we had rebuilt 80% of the number of units, and as of today you can see we've exceeded the number of units. In our case, I'll go back here, we collected additional units through ADUs, which a lot of the units that burned did not have. We also allowed for temporary units. People built bigger, people built with second units, and a lot of this was driven because of insurance gaps, trying to recover as much as they could. And our fire in the city affected all types of people, all types of neighborhoods. So the houses on the hill were maybe doctors and lawyers and the higher end homes were, and then obviously our working class and our lower income homes in the inner parts of our city. And then I'll leave you to talk about these stats, Tennis, but you did great as well in terms of the physical rebuild.
Yeah, it's been at a similar pace as the city. And if it weren't for interest rates, we'd probably be at the same pace now because we need so much housing. But you can go on our website at permitsonoma.org and see a breakdown of each of the fires and then the cumulative total if you're interested in the numbers. But I'm really more interested in hearing the questions and getting to the mental health suggestions that we can make for our colleagues. So I'll let the numbers speak for themselves.
Okay, so we are there. So that was the initial response, our physical rebuild response, which I say we did fantastic. We're still feeling it, but really where we're at is in the long-term, and I'm going to stop sharing, long-term resiliency part, which is, really respecting the process and acknowledging the impact goes far beyond the loss of a physical structure and the replacement back.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Claire and Tennis, for sharing this background about what you've gone through when these calamities happen. Yeah. So I'd like to start maybe with the first question, and anyone can add questions in the chat, or if you want to come off mute and ask a question, just raise your hand so I can call your name. So from my point of view, I work for our local health department in Riverside County. And health has many different dimensions, obviously, and mental health is one. And I think when it comes to experiencing traumatic events, sometimes it's hard to place yourself in terms of how you are feeling because of the shock of what you or your community may be experiencing. And I think for the purpose of our conversation today, as planners and people who work for government, we are dedicated public servants. And I want to really thank you for your service. I mean, what you described right now, 24-hour shifts in making decisions between continuing to serve or being with your family is like, I don't think I can comprehend that. I haven't gone through that. So I want to acknowledge that and pay my respects to your great work for doing what you did and for continuing, because I think as part of your experience, you build some type of resilience. And I think that's sort of where we want to learn from you. So perhaps maybe just to get us centered, if there is a moment during, I don't know, the first calamity that you had to respond, what was the feeling, the first feeling of, I don't know, like you were going to break because you just didn't know how was, things were going to play out, and what is it, what did you do in how you sort of build up on that feeling to gain strength and continue with really without breaking. So I'm curious about that.
Wow. Well, and I want to thanks for the question, Miguel, and I want to thank the folks who are already putting questions in the chat, because my predecessor, colleague, and friend Pete asks a good, insightful question that I think we can tear off easily. But to your, just for that example, and then maybe I'll switch over to responding to Pete's question. And thanks, Pete. For me, it would have been 2019 in the Kincaid fire. So by this time, we had way more practice than we wanted at wildfire response. And we had been called in to what CAL FIRE calls the Red Cap meeting. So this is all the top incident commanders from around the state. They're around round table, and they're looking at their attack map. And it was the moment, one of the more seasoned, and these are fantastic people. To me, the superlative representatives of government in California. They're just so competent and respectful of being in the locals community. These folks looked at the map, and I remember him pointing right to the east side of 101, and then his finger going down the Russian River all the way out to the ocean, and then south to the county, Marin County below us, and saying, if we don't stop the fire here, it's going to be a free run with high winds and dry fuels. And to see people with that much experience just look at each other with that look on their face. That was probably the key moment for me. But to get to Pete's question about how can we best prepare ourselves for what we do differently, I think anybody going through this for any kind of disaster would say you can never prepare enough. We, as Claire indicated, 10 days before the 2017 fire, we had a tabletop together, tabletop exercise for a fire outside of Oakmont, not the far eastern side of Santa Rosa. So we had done something, but we were not ready for the scale of what happened. Any of us, we were overwhelmed. First responders, second responders. So if anything, whether you've gone through this before and done some preparation, you can never do enough. And there's a reason why planners are in the planning and intelligence unit that runs practically the Emergency Operations Center, because we're the generalists in our day-to-day work. We're the one agency that reaches out to almost every other agency, whether you're in a city government or a county government. So those relationships are key. That's why we're wearing the blue vests in there. So, and part of preparation is not just training and learning the acronyms, which frankly, I think need to be reconsidered completely, but build those relationships now so that you're prepared when you're in that more intense environment. And train before the next disaster comes, because it's coming with climate change. It's just a matter of when. So train now, use it for this very accelerated data collection and decision-making process. It's not a bad way to think about how we can do our civilian jobs better and be more efficient. So that's another way of preparing our staff mentally for what they're doing. Because it's, as I've related to Pete and some others in a setting in Tom at Sonoma State University a seminar on it. You know, we had young planners, a couple of engineers, but mostly planners on our team. And we got a call from the incident commander to say, he said his plan section team was tapped out. He needed an evacuation plan for Sonoma Valley, and he needed it pretty quickly. So I asked how many people and when did he need it? 12,000 people, and he needed it within 4 hours. A number of critical things happened during that 4-hour period to lessen it to 2 hours. And to watch these young planners just pivot and critically think and communicate well and rely on their relationships to get information from others, like wrangling 3,500 school buses and rerouting traffic in a contraflow pattern that nobody had done in Sonoma County before. And then getting down to that last 10 minutes and then having the incident commander say, I don't think we're going to have to use the plan. We're going to hold the, we're not going to lose the town of Sonoma. And I'll tell you, there were a lot of white brows at that moment. But those were planners who'd never done this before. We are, the importance of our liberal arts training with critical thinking and effective communication, and hopefully our version of after action review demonstrated why we are so important to be the central cog in disaster response. So that's what I would say. Work on preparation, on practice, on pacing yourself, testing yourself, reevaluating, and creating your own approach, your own team's approach. And that's probably the best thing you can do beforehand to prepare yourself for what's coming next.
Yeah, that was a great response, Dennis. I'll just supplement. What's interesting is this morning, as I was thinking about this webinar, and somebody asked me, you know, what was sort of the most impactful moment. And I told them about that exact moment and how critical it was. And I showed them on the map that this was in Kincaid, that if it got past this point, just how fast it goes all the way to the coast. And I think we saw this in the Palisades as well, where it, once it hits a vein, really, there's no stopping it. And those areas in our county are quite challenged to get people out. And so I just remember my heart going all the way down to my feet and going, ooh, this is going to be tougher than anything I could imagine.
Right.
So yeah, that was my most impactful. But and even in the Tubbs fire, we have proximity to the fire chief, and our fire chief was well prepared and well equipped. And when you see your fire chief's face go white, it's humbling.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I would add is in terms of how are we equipped to navigate this, or what's the lesson learned, is one, I think it's a human experience. And so paying attention to the fact that this is a human experience, you know, the chief isn't invincible. You're not invincible. You don't have to be invincible. Fall back on the things that we are good at. You know, if you're good at facilitating, great, they need that. If you're good at connecting with hard to reach populations, great, connect with the hard reach, you know, fulfill all the things that we train on and are naturally good at as planners, and remind your team, you know, that they have those talents, because you can see when it's their first time or they get overwhelmed because, again, it's emotional. Remind them of what they offer, and then simplify the approach. You're not going to solve everything, and you don't have to. You know, you have a job, you need to go figure out the weather. You have a job, go find out what they need over in ops. You know, simplify it, control what you can control, which is a little bit, but that little bit is so effective. And Tenna's made a great example of how effective that little bit of the whole operation is. And just rely on that skill, because we do that naturally as planners, and which is why a lot of our departments get assigned a lot of complex initiatives, is because we do that. And so in the EOC, it's the same thing. They tap on us to multitask, to facilitate, to connect.
Good response. Miguel, I noticed this next question about how do we prepare to deal with people who've lost everything in a fire, and especially as professionals, and how do we get the information across without breaking down ourselves? Boy, I can think of an example for it. First of all, wildfire is so different than other disasters that I've experienced, at least, in that the fire survivors lose everything, including their credentials. They literally have to build their identity back because they've lost their driver's license, their passport, their social security card, their marriage license, birth certificates. So that becomes part of your practice. How do you help them rebuild their identity so they can go out and get support from the other avenues of government that they will need to get to a survivor's life in a new home? So I remember the first day we opened up our permit center, which at the time in a busy day would have 150 visitors. The first day we reopened, we had about 425. And these are just, the fire's still going, and the smoke is still in the community. And these folks are maybe living out of their cars, maybe at a friend's house. This is still pretty much anger and chaos. And I remember this one couple, they were lined up at the records station in the permit center because they were starting with, what permit records did you have of our house? I would guess World War II couple. He had his veteran hat on, and she was out front. He obviously kind of a proud, old-fashioned guy, and he started breaking down. He just couldn't take it anymore. And he's not the kind of person, I assume, that cried in public often. And to watch our very kind of macho but county surveyor just quietly go out, is a big guy, take this fellow under his arm and take him to the back where he could, in his own way, get hold of his emotions before he went out and joined, was the sign to me that you don't need to put a shield up. You don't, that it is okay. And we shared this with our staff. You're going to be encountering this for many, many days. If you're upset, it's okay to cry. It's okay to share these emotions with, these are members of our community. And that's what being honest with yourself in that moment is the most important thing to do.
100%. Again, I think initially you get this idea like, oh, I'm supposed to be so strong and I'm supposed to be able to handle all of this, but it's not natural to just accept all that. So, be honest with yourself, and you're all experiencing it from different perspectives, and be humbled by it, but it's okay. I know I remember the first time I cried coming away from a situation like that, because I had held it all up and just let it out. And I realized, oh, that's not going to be sustainable. So again, one of the things that, a lesson learned is, and there was another chat question here about staff training. That's one thing I would add to EOC training, is how to handle that, because they spend all their time preparing for, this is how you fulfill the report. Hours on how to fulfill a form to get materials and the technology, but they don't spend any time on the post-event mental health issues of people help the recovery team, or how to address citizens. It's not like they're coming in to complain about a tree permit or a subdivision. And we get really passionate, upset people about that, right? They're 4 inches from your face and they're letting you have it, and they're really upset, or they're crying about it. This is not like that. This is really core issue. And so anyway, I think some support as part of the training would go a long way. The aftermath training for mental health support. One interesting thing is I was noticing like the public safety group had dedicated resources because they do this all the time and they need these resources all the time. But what I noticed is the civilian side of emergency response, you have whatever everybody else has that's not even involved with the emergency response. And so you could kind of get isolated in that. And so your go-to is other people that have served. So there's quite a bond that gets created with those that served. But that's not enough. I do think professional help is important. And that's one thing I would change is immediate access. So you have that, whether it's through BetterHelp, some of the existing programs that cities offer.
I brought in therapists. I brought in chair masseuses. Brought in the service dog, lovingly named Miranda, who is a service dog for the district attorney's office. Just constantly roaming the office. At first, nobody took advantage of it, so had to do the undoed thing and put my hand up to be the first, and then people started going and approaching the therapist. And for those, I know we're in fiscally super thin times, but many of us have the, in our area, I think it's called Employee Service Program, EAP. Part of that is having therapists who are available already paid for. Mm-hmm. So if you have that EAP process in your jurisdiction, take advantage of it. You're going to need more than one therapist. So this became, this is now a response. We even had, unfortunately, a couple of years ago now, one of our colleagues had a heart attack in our office and was clinically dead. And fortunately revived and is back with us. Crazy man. And first thing I did was bring in therapists because a lot of staff had seen this this was their first time encountering this kind of thing in or out of the workplace. So to Claire's point, be honest with yourself as individuals and as an organization and seek support.
And one thing I would add is some cities, and we did the same, we had some immediate assistance and nobody showed up until, some of the leaders started to do the pet the dog and go to the massage. But everybody has their own pace. So one thing I would advocate for is maybe it's a year later. Because honestly, you don't know what's going to hit you, or maybe the weather changes. I mean, it was the announcement of fire season. I think every year after Tubbs, it would creep up earlier in the year. And every time they would announce it, we'd all get sick to our stomach. If you had Santa Ana winds, we'd get sick to our stomach. It's those times I think that the leadership of a city or county or response agency should also offer some bonus to those, especially those that survived the recovery response.
There you go.
And thank you. There is a question from Rob Olshansky. He says, what advice do you have for LA planners as they navigate the next few years?
Well, first of all, you're doing a great job. I was down as part of the After the Fire team. And for those of you who have gone through this and want to participate, After the Fire is a great way of taking your experience and sharing that, because mutual aid for second responders is still really lame. And we need to do a better job at the state of recognizing that we can all help each other. So this nonprofit does that. And we were down and have been down probably 5 times now and officials from Santa Rosa, from County of Sonoma, from Colorado, from Hawaii, many of us who've been in these places before, we pick up new members. Mm-hmm. It's one of the loveliest things that comes out of this, as Claire mentioned, as a band of colleagues here. But LA County In Altadena, guys are doing a fantastic job under Amy Bodek's leadership. Fantastic colleague. I went down and worked in the permit center with her one day. And this is not even 2 months after, and she already had her shop up and operating quietly. There's all the braggadocio and politicizing that goes on about who's doing well and who's not. And classic good planning leader just kept her head down, opened up multiple centers, and started serving her public in very modest means. But I think you're doing really well. Reach out to your colleagues, but it's important to own it when nobody comes into this with perfection. So that you've got that earliest start and you're already helping people. It's fantastic.
Yeah, from what I can see, you guys are doing just a fantastic job. I think what also helps is getting the news out, which, a lot of times we work hard and we take for granted that that's enough just to work hard. But I think it's really critical to find a way or a team that supplements the work and gets that word out, pushes out the positive information, what you are doing, and not to take it for granted that people just know. Because that really perpetuates. It's not enough just for the organization to rise up and it's the community is impacted. So the community wants to elevate and know that, people are paying attention, people are on it, and you guys are. So yeah, just continue to get the word out. And I think the communication has been really good so far, but I would stay the course on that.
Excellent, thank you. I don't see any other questions for now, but feel free to raise your hand if you like. There's quite a bit of takeaways from what you shared today. And one piece that I think is really important is the piece of building relationships with not just the community, but I guess the ecosystem that has to deal with the response and the recovery.
Good way of putting it.
One component is, I think, as a vehicle to help you build trust. Build relationships is building trust.
Yes.
So what would you comment on that end? When, people may be just skeptical and they wouldn't want to build a relationship with you. How did you deal with that?
Take that first step. And I'm sure this happens with anybody who's been involved in this. I, to this day, in a 4,000 person organization, met 10% of the workforce that came through the Emergency Operations Center. And I still see them. Most of the time we know each other's names, and usually it's around a non-disaster response or recovery issue, whether it's the Mako mini kitchens or whatever we're dealing with. And the trust is there from the disaster, so that we laugh when we see each other, and sometimes our bosses are surprised that we would ever know each other. So think about flipping that. Start building that trust now. So when you're in the bunker or however you respond, you have that friendship in place. Start building those networks. Department heads have them, but usually mid-managers don't. And I'm encouraging people within our organization down to the line staff level, go have fun with people in other departments. We're very fortunate. We have about 22 different licenses under our roof. So we have our own kind of microcosm of the county government within our own building. Thanks in great part to Pete. That helps. They have a precedent for forming those relationships now that they're going to need later.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100% that it's definitely changed the way I think people are thinking about how municipal organizations function. I happen to be in the city of Novato now, and it's a limited agency, so we don't have fire and sanitation, water, and all of those are going to be your partners for just common permits, but also when you need to connect. So we exercise daily, trying to connect and again humanize and have that be part of the fabric. So not just to be limited even in your own organization, but to reach out and get to know people.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Another aspect that resonated with me from what you share is the idea of, and I wrote it, use your superpower. You know, what is your superpower? As a planner, are you a good communicator? Are you good with analytics? I think that is really, really important to put it into action when it's needed. And I think sometimes we don't necessarily have opportunities to exercise our own superpowers because sometimes our work is repetitive, sometimes linear. But I think it's important to know what is it that we're all about. I really like that aspect that you shared. And I think I'd like to connect with I think an opportunity in a gap that you just identified, which is the portion of integrating a mental health component into emergency response plans. I mean, that is, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And especially coming from you, suggesting that.
Yeah, I think just to talk about the superpower, I think that's great. I look at people differently when I hire them. Like, what I look at as a collection of known talents. But what's interesting is there's unknown talents. So diversity of assignments, situations so now that the EOC is like a regular thing, unfortunately, it's like bringing people in and out that, maybe they're quiet, but actually they're really good under they're steady under stress. Consequently, what we find out is they have superpowers in their day-to-day job, but again, we're human, be humble. They can't do the emergency response. So maybe they have the title or they have the vibe in the office that they would be able to do it. And you know what? It's okay. There's a bit of adrenaline needed to get through it. And inner strength, and it's okay if people are honest about that. And there was a moment where, well, not just one moment, but a few moments, a few individuals where I had to sit with them. I could see they're breaking down. It's just too much. And either they just need a week off, or they need to be off they want to do something. There's jobs for everyone in this, right? The EOC gets a lot of the glory because it's so, intense and exciting because you get the first news. But back of house, the people going to your permit center, they're just as essential. And start placing people into different job opportunities. And some of them are greeters, and some of them need to go sit with the folks, find out what people want to do or want to explore in themselves. You'll see people just completely blossom, but be okay when they don't blossom. It's okay. Maybe that's not their assignment.
Yeah. All to the good. And again, around critical thinking and communication that are so foundational to a good planning practice. I would add gallows humor. There have been so many times when in the middle of the night, I just needed a boost. So I would call Ms. Hartman and know that she might be in a similar place. And to have that just, pardon me, but pee in your pants laughter at 3 o'clock in the morning is what gets you through to dawn. Or Lisa in Santa Barbara County, or Amy in LA County. It's just priceless. And humor is one of the things I treasure about planners. Really good quality humor. And I see Jane Riley on here that helped me through a number of instances. And Pete asked a great question about, are you aware of any jurisdiction or organization that has an actual plan for how to support staff over the course of a major disaster response? We are working on one, and after the fire, But I think it would be a great thing to couple with APA California on. So again, so many of these, as we've all done, and not just Santa Rosa and County Sonoma, that everyone who's gone through this, we are sharing different versions of ordinances, kind of disaster recovery in a box. We really need to coordinate this at the state level so that we can have a much more coordinated way of updating this information.
Excellent. Yeah, I think we're into something now. You see, you planted a seed today. I think one of the superpowers of APA California is to begin these sort of conversations to look at the future of planning. And this is really an amazing idea.
Much appreciated. Looks like Alex Hines has a question.
Let's see, is Alex here?
That's always a question. We won't know the answer to it until he responds.
Alex is here and he has a question. Alex, please unmute yourself. Maybe it's not Alex. Alex, are you with us? Oh,
there's only one.
There
Alex.
you go.
He's got his hand
Has
up.
to unmute. Okay, Alex. I think you can unmute yourself now. There you go. We can't hear you, Alex. Let's see. I don't see. He is, yeah, he's allowed to talk. Yes, you can talk, Alex. Why can't we hear you?
Text Pete your question.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, maybe if you want to. Yeah, well, yeah, you addressed Pete's question, right? Oh, yeah, maybe Alex, if you could type your comment or question. I'm sorry, we can't hear you. But in the last 3 minutes, I'd like to offer the space for Claire and Tennis to provide us with some closing remarks. Anything else that you wanted to say, but you didn't get a chance to say, this will be the time.
Well, first of all, it's an honor to speak on this topic and to share this information with all our colleagues. I think it's so important to keep digging deeper into what we can do better, and also to be humbled by what we've accomplished and what we're continue to learn from it. I'm excited that we've added even the idea of mental health to emergency response, because I could see, and over time, I could just see that it's taking its toll. And a lot of what happens is those that get involved with this tend to become that group. And it can be an opportunity, but it can also be a burden. So I think if you can even the playing field so that, more people feel comfortable entering into emergency response. One, we'd retain them in California and our great cities, because you could see the migration of planners. I could see the migration out of Santa Rosa, where they're like, I can go to that city and it's not having problems, and here we're having them every year. And so, if you build the support, that part shouldn't be scary, being part of the team. So I love that we've added mental health to the equation. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Ennis?
Just to reiterate with APA, the subject's starting to become important at the conferences, which I think is great. And as long as we keep it front and center before us as professionals on an annual basis, that's probably the best platform for that continual reminder to people that mental health is so important, with all the other pressures outside of disaster response and recovery that are heaped on us as planning professionals. So appreciate the organization providing this focus today.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And right before we conclude, I do want to mention there was a question about AICP certification maintenance credits. This webinar was not registered for that, but you can do it. You can enter it
Self-report
by yourself if you want to use 4 credits. And with that, I'd like to thank you, Claire and Tennis for sharing your time, your expertise, and your ideas with us today in this important.
Great. Thanks for bringing all of us together.
Yeah.
Thank you
Great
so much. And I'm going to clap for you, half of the audience.
And for all of our colleagues who joined in, thank you.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.